In progress.
Welcome back, everyone. It's our great pleasure to have Jean-Marc Richard today here. He's from University of Lyon in France. Just a couple of words, a brief introduction about him. He's a graduate from École Normale Supérieure. He has held various research positions in France, in Paris Sud, Paris 6, Grenoble, Lyon, but also abroad, outside France, in Stonebrook, Brookhaven, in Aarhus, in Denmark, Heidelberg and Bonn in Germany. And he has been in several international centers, such as the Louis Langevin Institute in Grenoble, the CERN in Geneva, ECT Star in Trento. And his work focused on several things. I picked just some areas here. So interactions between hadrons, the quark model, exotic atoms, and if you want to put a general label on everything, properties of few body quantum systems. So Jean-Marc, thank you for accepting our invitation and your time.
Okay, thank you very much for this very kind introductions. I will discuss about physics of the doubly heavy tetraquark, which has been discovered very recently. This is, in fact, at the end of last July. And I will try to make a link with atomic physics and to stress the analogy and the differences. I would like to say a word about critical stability. I'm sorry I was not available on Monday morning. I think that you know that this ECT Star Trento that you mentioned, it was starting operating in 92, and in 96 they had a call for a second wave of workshops, and there were several applications dealing with Q-body physics, and in particular one by Axel Jensen and one by myself, and Mottelson, as you know, is a very clever guy. He noticed that there was a lot of overlap and also some complementarity between the two, and he suggested that we merge those two applications, and this was the first meeting on critical stability. And then we iterate in Les Ouches, we iterate in again in Trento, in Dresden, twice in Erice, one first occurrence in Brazil, and then back in Dresden and Brazil. And then we started the proceeding from Les Ouches. I think that was special issue of Q-body systems. And as was noticed, in fact, we started in Dresden to have a school associated with the workshop, and this was rather encouraging, and this is why we have this school this year. The aim of critical stability, at that time, you know, the big Q-body conferences were really dominated by nuclear physics. It was in principle interdisciplinary, but I would say it was this is a joke that, in fact, when we start discussing pâté, that you should say what is the recipe of a lark pâté. This is one horse, one lark, because a bird, of course, is much more expensive. So in fact, it was a horse of nuclear physics and the small pieces of the rest. But no, the big conferences are very much more interdisciplinary, as it was in fact the spirit when they started launching this series of Q-body physics in the 50s. I discussed, for instance, with Frank Levine from Providence, who was one of the really major actor of that. But then we came back to this interdisciplinary character in critical stability, having talked on nuclear physics, particle physics, atomic physics, chemistry, solid state, mathematical physics, with a lot of time for discussion, usually in the pleasant surrounding, like for instance, Erice, or last time along the oceans in Brazil. So we have opportunity to discuss onset of Efimov physics in our community, which is now, of course, one of the major topics in Q-body conferences. So today I will survey a little bit some aspect of the quark model, especially dealing with the multi-quarks. And I will present the potential model and discuss what the possibility of having the binding due to the spin-spin interaction, and then something which is less known, but which is operating for this new tetraquark is a chromoelectric binding. And I will make a comparison with atomic physics in the spirit of interdisciplinary, character of this meeting. I had a chance to collaborate with many people, though I am very glad to say that I benefit very much from these collaborations. The new thing is this state, in the final state of consisting of two D mesons. And
Jean-Marc, may I interrupt you? Some people are asking me if you could put your presentation in full screen because the font's kind of small.
Yeah, but I try. Okay. Okay, maybe. Okay, let's say I stop share. Okay. It was working very well the other day. Is that better? No, you.
Now we can't see it.
It's okay?
No, you have to share your screen again.
Okay.
Using Zoom. Yeah. Go back to Zoom.
Yeah, okay.
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 I think that's better. Is it better, Tobias?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, sorry for that. So I have now to go back to the introduction. So I will review the status of exotic hadrons and try to understand why multi-quarks exist only in very specific configurations. And this is something that has to be clarified, because sometimes there are rumors saying that, in certain class of model, you predict too many states. But this is not true for the quark model if the quark model is treated properly. But then I will, as I say, discuss the analogy and differences with respect to atomic physics, in particular discuss what is the situation if you change, the masses of the quark and antiquark, and if you, in a molecular system, like you start from the positronium molecule and try to change the masses. And then I will discuss why the positronium molecule is stable if you neglect annihilations, while if you take 4 quarks without spin-spin interaction in the pure chromoelectric potential, which is the limit of very, very heavy quark, then this is not bound. Why there are such differences? So the situation is extremely rich experimentally, but also extremely confusing, because there have been many candidates, mainly resonances. This means states which eventually decay by strong interaction. Sometimes they decay, but not too fast. So they are, I would say, extremely narrow, but not extremely narrow, but rather narrow for things like 20 MeV of width. But as you will see, the new tetraquark opens the door for states which are stable. So this is something new that is we have discovered last summer. And then there are being many confusion. For instance, in the 60s, but probably most of the students here in this audience do not remember the pentaquark of the 60s, but then there were some baryons named Z baryons. They were, of course, fantastic because they were strangeness plus one, where the usual hyperons have negative strangeness, but they were obtained from analysis, phase shift analysis of K nucleon scattering without polarization observable. So in fact, if you have two amplitudes and only one set of data, you cannot fix the amplitude for sure. I don't know why those papers appeared, because it was really misleading. More recently in Japan, people found another pentaquark, again with strangeness plus one, and interestingly, some partners to try to build an anti-decuplet, but it was not confined in experiment like Bell or Babar. And very recently, we have seen hidden charm pentaquark, for instance. Those are states which have the quantum numbers of the protons, but much higher in mass because they contain, in fact, the CC bar pairs. So this started by LHCb in 2015, 6 years ago, and they are still alive, although they have been seen in only one experiment. Baryonium mesons have been very popular in the 70s. They were about 2 GeV mesons, preferentially coupled to baryons anti-baryon channels. But they have not been confined with experiments done with better antiproton beams. But there are perhaps some indication that in the decay of, for instance, B mesons or epsilon, sometimes you produce a pair baryon antibaryon, and sometimes you have some enhancement. So this physics is perhaps not completely dead. The physics of scalar mesons I will not touch, otherwise I will speak until midnight, because this is there are dozens and dozens of interesting papers. It is clear that there is a very abundant spectrum, and too many states for the pure Q-bar quark model. And there are certainly some states with have a large tetraquark components. So this is something. Dibaryons also are something which is open. There are a series of states that is might be considered as N delta resonance or a 6 quark state, which is there and discussed. Of course, the most discussed in the last decades are those states that are called XYZ, apart that the PDG, the particle data group, recommend another notation, but probably people will keep this notation XYZ. And the X3872 was the first of this series, and it has the quantum number of a charmonium state, but it is at the mass about the same range, but it cannot fit really a pure CC bar structure. So it appears as something which is metastable, D bar compound. So if you like the molecular picture, or if you prefer, this is something like a CC bar QQ bar resonance. And what is remarkable with this state that it has been discovered in one experiment at Bell in Japan. It was confirmed in many experiments with electron or proton or hadron beam. So this is something which is very serious. But again, this is not a state which is strictly speaking stable. It is metastable because you can see that there are possibility of internal CC bar annihilation or decay into CC bar plus QQ bar. It is metastable in the sense that it looks just at the edge of the threshold for D bar. But it is clear that there is another threshold, but this threshold is not really seen by the state too quickly. So in fact, it does not dissociate immediately. This is a miracle of this X3872. Another state which is extremely popular, but it was discussed already in the in the 60s by Dalit, Chuan, and thousands of people later, that in fact the state is one of the first excitation of the lambda, of the hyperons, but it appears relatively low in mass and as compared to the predictions. And then its properties suggest that it is something like a K bar N molecules. And then there was many debates about, is this lambda 1405 really a molecule, or is there a dual picture that is sometimes it is behaved like a quark model which contains some correction, or is it sometimes a molecule? I discussed, I remember, with Jeff Chu, and then he said that the quark model and the molecular picture are maybe two aspects of the same reality. But more recently, especially in Spain, people discuss, no, there are two states. If you analyze the data carefully, you find a double pole. The one pole is correspond to QQS, and another pole to K bar N, but then there are some mixing between the two, but they are really two different objects. Of course, the physics of hadrons, especially of exotic hadrons, has been discussed in several models, which are interesting and sometimes even innovative in the sense that they have anticipated some of the candidates. There are bags, strings, die quark, etc. But they should be examined critically, I would say. This is not to criticize for the pleasure to criticize my colleagues, but this is sometimes the clustering is assumed. So people, I remember when I entered this field in the 70s, people say in the big conference, oh, I have a die quark, I have a die quark here and an anti-die quark here. There is some barrier in between, so they remain relatively stable. But in our field of few-body physics, we aim at rigor, and we say that the structure of a state should be deduced from a model and not guessed by unwavering argument. The second problem, sometimes that you try to explain one state, for instance, this X3872, that you designed a nice model, very convincing, but you realize, or you don't, or some people realize for you that this model predict many other states of similar. And then sometimes those states are simply not seen. For instance, the isospin 1 partner of X3872 is not seen yet, and it's predicted in some model. But this is not new, this problem. I remember that one of the pioneers of the physics of die quark, but very careful, Frederickson, he was against the problem of demand de Terran. He said, if you believe the die quark, then you have a state of 3 die quark which has baryon number 2. And then you might, you like or you don't like, but if you don't find this state, this means that there is some, you should not take the die quark too seriously. I remember again in the 70s, we have this bag model, which was very popular. And one crucial ingredient in the model was the volume energy, which is correspond to the energy for having a bubble of perturbative QCD inside the non-perturbative vacuum. B was a phenomenological constant. And we realized that R, the radius of the bag, which is optimized, to minimize the energy, increase very slowly as compared to the number of constituents. So the bag model tend to favor, a lot of big multi-quark, and this is not seen really, this proliferation. And then the naive, and but they works rather well in the case of ordinary hadrons. So it was tempting, to generalize the contains also short-range part, which has this funny SU3 coefficients, which are color coefficients, which correspond to the exchange of a color octet. You know, in nuclear physics, if you exchange the pions on the row, then you have a tau1, tau2, because you have an isospin factor. Here you have color octet. Why color octet? Because if you have a color singlet confinement, then you confine everything. You are confined with your neighbor, you are confined with your table, etc. So in fact, if you want to have color singlet well separated, the confinement should not be color independent. So and the simplest recipe is to say that the interaction is due to a color octet exchange. So this is why this coefficient is normalized in the sense that V of R will be the quark-gonium potential. So if you apply for baryons, then you will get a factor 1/2 for each pair. And this is the way it is defined. So this is the color operator. If you have an antiquark, then you have to have a change. This is well documented. And this is the analog of, but for the spin-spin interaction, which is associated with a very short range potential. And then this is a term that makes, for instance, singlet mesons lower than the triplet. And in the case of baryons, the spin 1/2 baryons lower than the spin 3/2. Again, this is something that is well probed, and it is very well operating to reproduce known hyperfine splitting in the ground state of ordinary hadrons. So the question, I repeat here this equation because this will be really our basic tool for this talk. If you use this for the 4 quarks, 2 quarks, 2 antiquarks, do you produce stable multiquarks or not? And then I will not cover, but some people have done already some serious calculation. For instance, a Japanese group around Oka and Iyama. Do you produce resonances? And then you can discuss several corrections. There are probably 1,000 corrections to apply to this, but I will discuss 2 corrections. A correction that consists of giving up the 2-body character here and to try to use 3-body and 4-body forces. Because in fact, in QCD, nothing tells you that the potential should be pairwise. And then I will discuss what is changed if you use relativistic kinematics. And the question is, do we need a careful handling of the 4-body, 5-body problem? And then in the particle physics community, usually people say, oh, I don't care about the 3-body. Already the 3-body problems, they are completely ignorant. And then in the 2-body case, already they are making rough approximations. I would say that if you apply this to charmonium, you should not take this model very seriously because, you know, 1 plus or minus 1 MeV, given all the corrections that are present, this is not very relevant. You cannot probe this model to a precision of 1 MeV. But if you enter multi-quark, you have to be extremely careful because you have to solve the threshold with this model consistently, and then the multi-quark with this model. And the question is, in this model, do you predict state below the threshold or not? For this, you have to solve very carefully the 4-body problem because otherwise you have a vague indication that the lower state is around the threshold, but our question is whether we are above or below. And this we have to do seriously. Let's start with the chromomagnetic binding. So let's see the second term, the last term here in this Hamiltonian. It was studied by several people. The first one making a systematic where the famous paper by Deroula, Georgia, Glashow, and then Sakharov, Lipkin have discussed. And Bob Jaffe used this type of potential, except that in fact it was in the framework of the Bag model, but he had the same operator. So in fact, the consideration by Jaffe, also for the potential model. But it were developed really in the by Jaffe. So he realized that with this interaction, you have a satisfactory classification of four-quark state in the scalar sector. In particular, an understanding on why the state with isospin 2 are much above the state with isospin 0. And then the most famous was he demonstrated that there are attractive coherences of this operator for the configuration that was called H as exact quark, H equal UUDDSS. And of course, the people of MIT, they are very convincing and very powerful. You know, in US, if you have a committee for deciding there is always somebody from MIT. So in fact, you have to try to not to contradict too much MIT people. But Bob Jaffe was very clever in designing this because it is still discussed. You know, he wrote a paper in '77 and it is still discussed seriously by people. And it was searched in many experiments and it is not seen. For instance, one of those experiments, but this is an indication that people have discovered helium-6 double lambda. So this means that an helium particle with two lambda attached, but they have not seen the decay into helium plus H. Okay, maybe the branching ratio is not very large, but this is one of the many negative searches. And more precisely, what has done Jaffe? In fact, that he noticed that for the ordinary baryons, this quantity here, I just attach once more this color fact, this normalization factor, gives you a value of -3R. So this means that for the threshold of relevant for this exact quark, which is made of two UDS quark clusters, so this means two lambdas, you have a negative shift with -3 times the factor corresponding to the coupling constant and the spatial matrix element. But then for delta minus n, the mass difference corresponds to delta equal +3, and this is the value of 300 MeV. So it means that there is about 100 MeV for 1 unit of delta. And for the H, the group theoretical calculation by Jaffe found a value of -9 half, which is less than for lambda lambda. So this corresponds to 150 MeV below the lambda lambda threshold. This was the main achievement. But of course, in this reasoning, he assumes that the masses are equal, and then that the matrix element of the spin-spin operator is the same. As you know, here you have the masses. So he assumes that the masses are equal. So SUD have the same mass. So this is the SU3 limit. And then he assumes that this matrix element is the same in the exact quark and in the baryons. And of course, people discuss those hypotheses. And then SU3 breaking, unfortunately, does not help the binding. So it is, and then this hypothesis for V should be SS here. Is much smaller in age than in baryon. This was pointed out by Oka, Yazaki, and others. That in fact, in a large exact quark, you know, the short range correlation are much weaker than in a compact nucleons. But still, some recent lattice calculation finds the H not too far from the threshold. Some even find it bound. But then, although the same mechanism was proposed for a pentaquark with the AV antiquark, for the Q bar, UUDS, and some permutation in the light sector, but it was not seen, was only one experiment looking at this particular pentaquark, and it was not conclusive. So in fact, this is the question of magnetic binding is still open, but so far we have not seen the age predicted by Jaffe. Now, what about the rest of the Hamiltonian? You can see that if the masses are very large, the spin-spin interaction disappears because there are this 1/mi mj factor. So in some limit, we should deal with this spin-independent Hamiltonian, which I will call the chromoelectric part of the Hamiltonian, kinetic energy and static potential. Here, there is no obvious excess of attraction because if you look at the cumulated strength here, V is attractive. So a positive number is give me some binding. Then for the for the threshold, I get a cumulative strength of 2, and for the tetraquark, I get 2. So in fact, this is not obvious. So we have to look. And for equal masses, I will come back a little bit later. I can not find any binding. I have not mentioned that, in fact, if you have 2 quarks, 2 antiquarks, then you have 2 possibilities for color state in that basis, either color 3 bar 3, making an overall singlet, or color 6 bar, making an overall singlet. So for any of those color configuration, or even if you introduce mixing between them, then you don't find binding. But what was our discovery some years ago, 40 years ago, in fact, that in fact, if you use unequal masses in the sense that you make 2 heavy quarks and 2 light antiquarks, or vice versa, then if the mass ratio is large enough, then you get binding. And this is the beginning of the story of the double charm tetraquark. The critical mass ratio depends on the potential. It's not the same for quadratic Coulomb linear. In practice, it is extremely large. And also it is, as noticed for instance by Lipking, when the state becomes well bound, in fact, the color structure is dominated by 3 bar 3. So in fact, it looks a little bit like an antibaryon with 3 bar, 3 bar, 3 bar, making an overall singlet. This is, so there is a dynamical generation of the diquark, but you can see that here the diquark is not put by hand at the beginning. It is obtained from the calculation at the end. And then this is something referred to as a heavy diquark, antiquark. The diquark and the quark behave a little bit in the same way. Now, as I say, a pure chromoelectric binding is not achievable with C or even with a B type of quark. Then the mass ratio should be a little bit larger. So what was quickly realized, in fact, that in fact, if you want to produce this state, to have it stable or nearly stable, then you should combine chromoelectric and chromomagnetic effect. This means that instead of saying a vague Q bar for the light sector, which could be either spin 0 or the spin 1, spin 0 or spin 1, you have really to concentrate on U bar, D bar, because in that case, you know, the spin-spin interaction is attractive for isospin and spin equals 0. So this means that you produce an isoscalar, so no charge partner, and then it has to be spin 0 in the light sector. So if you have 2 identical C's, they are spin 1. So at the end of the day, you get 1 plus state. And then Young and Rosina, and later Barnea and others, and my Spanish colleagues, they found that CC U bar D bar is at the edge with the uncertainty, not due to the calculation, because they have done very accurate 4-body calculation, but you know, because the model is not fixed too high precisions. And then it was discovered that this summer, almost bound, but very, very narrow, but still decaying by strong interaction. Certainly, the BB partner will be bound, and then it will decay weakly. And we have already calculated the lifetime, and we found that the lifetime is larger than for the double B baryons, which are not yet being discovered. But this will be interesting experimentally to distinguish between the two, because this one will have a longest track, in the experiment. So I promise I will make a comparison with atomic physics to fulfill the interdisciplinary character of these workshops. What is the mechanism that bind this state when the mass ratio increase? Okay, you can say, okay, the mechanism is that I solve the four-body problem and I get this result. But this is not completely satisfactory. And the others, in fact, I discovered later was that the same mechanism that makes PP E minus H2 more stable in unit, of course, of the respective threshold energy than the positronium molecule, which is stable if the internal annihilation is disregarded, is a favorable breaking of symmetry. I believe that I have discovered that mechanism, but this is life. Sometimes you find that believe that you have discovered something, and then somebody pointed, oh, somebody else got it before. Okay, this happened sometime. But Adamovsky, in fact, was very fair. And I invited, and he came to one of our critical stability workshops. So in fact, we make it clear that he had sometimes, this is, the picture is maybe not very, very sharp, but this is one of the paper by Adamovsky. And this is the paper we did about the hydrogen molecule, why it is more stable than the positronium molecule, because there is some subtlety here about the ordering of the threshold state. This is why I took Swiss collaborators, because the Swiss, they are very accurate. So in fact, to fix that particular point, the Swiss component was extremely crucial. And then we have even made a review in physics report about the stability of few charge system in quantum mechanics, where we show how, by changing the masses, some system becomes more bound or less bound. So let's start with something very elementary about symmetry breaking. This could be tomorrow morning sessions, because it's even for elementary school, You all know, here I have removed all H bar, M, etc., K, because this can be absorbed by rescaling, by absorbed in the definition of the units. If you start with, for lambda equals 0, you have a one-dimensional harmonic oscillator. And then in those funny units, the ground state energy is 1 in state of 1/2 of H bar omega. Let's take 1. Then if you add, this is in all textbooks of quantum mechanics, then if you add odd term, linear, then in fact the energy becomes 1 minus lambda square over 4, and this is less. And people can try to understand, okay, because second order perturbation for the ground state is negative, or you can say this is convex function, etc. But more generally, if you have any symmetry breaking, even H is even part plus odd, if you apply the variational principle, this means that you try to get the upper bound of the value of H using the wave function of H naught, which is even. Then the matrix element of H1 disappears with this particular trivial wave function. So this means that you deduce that the energy of H is less than energy of H naught, and this is what is really experienced here when you do the explicit calculations. But this is very general. You can say that this symmetry is parity, charge conjugation, permutations. So you can say, okay, if I want to make something stable, I have to break all possible symmetries and make the system completely disparate. But this is not the way it works. Because to have a four-body system, you have to be below the threshold. In fact, there is a very strong competition between the four-body configuration and the 2+2 configuration. And then sometimes when you break a symmetry, the threshold benefits more. So breaking a symmetry, all energy decrease, but the binding decrease also, or the binding is destroyed simply. So this is the problematics we have with tetraquark and other four-body system. When we break a symmetry, what happens? And for instance, let's take a particle identity. Let's suppose that two particles plus two antiparticles with some flavor-independent interaction V. Flavor-independent means that the potential does not depend on the mass. Then, if you break the particle identity symmetrically to be sure, then I take one heavy, one light in each sector, and then it becomes unstable or less, even more unstable if the mass ratio increase. For instance, in QED, you start from the positronium molecule, which is stable, and then this molecule disappears if the mass ratio becomes larger than 2.2. This was, for instance, done by Bresanini of the Como University or Varga. And in the quark model with central forces, if you take equal masses, this is unstable. But if you take unequal masses, this is even more unstable with respect to that threshold. And of course, as I say for the X, sometimes it can be metastable with respect to the other threshold. Like in QED, people discuss sometimes the possibility of hydrogen, anti-hydrogen, metastable configurations. But this is not stable with respect to protonium plus positronium. But what about charge conjugations? This means that I look at equal masses, and then I introduce two heavy on one side and two light on the other side. Here, for simplicity, it's better to assume that I have the same reduced mass. So this means that mu is the average in the sense of inverse masses. So this means that they have the same threshold, because what you do when you calculate a threshold, this is a two-body system, the first thing is to do, you calculate the reduced mass. So they have the same reduced mass with the same threshold. So if you make this decomposition with respect to odd or even with respect to charge conjugation, then you get this full Hamiltonian is equal to the Hamiltonian with equal masses mu plus a term which breaks charge conjugations, which don't give the symmetry. And then the point is that the energy of H is less than the energy of H even, but they have the same threshold. So in fact, you gain for H as compared to H even. So in QED, you start with a stable configuration, and then you end with H2 starting from PS2 from H2, which is much more stable, even they are stable exact state. But then in the quark model, you start with something unstable, then it becomes stable at some point. So in fact, the mechanism, the chromoelectric binding of the tetraquark is the same as the binding of the hydrogen molecule as compared to the positronium molecule. And this is interesting, the comparison, because the positronium molecule was predicted in 1945 by Wheeler. And then the year after, or Norwegian working at Yale, he made a four-body calculation, and said, oh, this is probably not stable. But the next year, the same or associated with another Norwegian, which was a great figure of quantum calculation in the very good mathematical physicist. They demonstrate the stability analytically for PS2. And then it was refined in variational calculation. And to tell you about, why the four-body problem is difficult, delicate, you can see if you scan physical review that there is a paper signed by somebody of a very, very prestigious US university saying the calculation by O is wrong because they have not removed the center of mass motions. This is something for you students, very interesting that in fact, you open a textbook on quantum mechanics, say one can separate the center of mass motion from the relative motion. But is it necessary? Is it compulsory to separate? No. Because if your trial wave function for the variational calculation is translation invariant, the energy of the center of mass will disappear automatically. And then if you look at the early calculation in quantum mechanics made in the 20s and 30s, many calculations were done without explicitly going to Jacobi coordinate. So in fact, another interesting point with the positron molecule is that it was predicted in 45 and it was discovered in 2007. So 62 years later. For the tetraquark, there have been only 40 years. But this means that if you make prediction of exotic state, you better start to be young and don't drink too much because you have to stay, in good shape to see the result. And I have 2 minutes. I will just say something about the equal mass case. Because this is something very interesting, very challenging for the experimentalist to see whether you can find a state with 4 heavy quarks, 2 quarks, 2 antiquarks. Recently, there have been some interesting results by LHCb where they have discovered a resonance in J-psi mass spectrum. So a state which is a resonance of 2 J-psi. But the question is open about the possibility of having a state below the threshold. For instance, my good friend Karliner, Nusinov, and Rosner, they have said, if you have a dipositronium, this implies that there is a d-quarkonium state. Not so simple. Because again, you take this type of model, and then some people find that four-body state is with equal masses. Here, the masses are equal, are stable, but in fact, most serious four-body calculations do not get binding. And in fact, here, I'm sorry, this is the end of the talk, but it's something. You try, a class of four-body systems with an attractive potential, but then the strengths being spread over all the pairs in a different way. The only rule being that the sum of strength is equal to 2. The configuration of interest, I would just say, I would just consider the possibility of the type where you have 1/3 minus something for 2 pairs and 1/3 plus something for the 4 last pairs, so that the sum is equal to 2. And then you look at what are the value of how the spectrum, or the ground state of H evolve when you change lambda. The first thing is that you can convince yourself that for lambda equals 0, the system is symmetric, then you have the highest energy. This is again a consequence of the variational principle. And then you look at the value of, and then when you depart from that, you have a well-defined convexity, and then a decreasing function on both sides. And you look where is the threshold, it corresponds to this line. Either the meson-meson threshold in QECD or the atom-atom threshold in QED. And then if you look at the positronium molecule, the value of lambda is here, far on the left. But then if you look at QCD, you know, the value for 3 bar 3 is here, the value for 6 bar color are here. So in fact, the state is above the threshold. And you know, this is some sense you can say that the tetraquarks are penalized by the non-abelian algebra. Now, when you go from charge to color, you know, the rule of calculation are not exactly the same. And then, in fact, you have states which are too symmetric in the coefficients, as compared to PS2, where you have +1 or -1. And then you have a maximal asymmetry. Of course, if you open a textbook on quantum chemistry, this is not explained this way. They say that there is a polarization of one atom by the other. But this is equivalent because the fact that the coefficients are associated, this means that some pairs are attractive, so they tend to be together, and some pairs are less attractive or repulsive, and then in fact they are away. So this means that each atom is far from being spherical due to the interaction with the other atom. And this is just the algebraic version here. Just a small calculation, I would say, I would have done is to replace, you know, the linear part of the potential by string-inspired potential. This is a good opportunity to play with Steiner trees. I will say that the changes are not really dramatic because the optimization of the string gives you something, and then if we account for the antisymmetrization, will not give you something more attraction. It will be interesting if you deal with non-identical quarks. So maybe for the BC type of tetraquark, it might help this configuration. And the second last thing is the effect of relativistic kinematics. As you know, in positronium, there are many relativistic corrections. One of them is relativistic kinematics. So we have just looked at that particular correction in the case of tetraquark. And then, in fact, we replace p squared over 12 as a relativistic analog. And for any given potential, the energy will decrease. But again, you know, there is a competition between the threshold and the forebody. And in fact, the forebody is less changed in relative values than the two-body. So this means that you have a slight decrease of the binding energy because the relativistic effect affects more the meson than the tetraquark. So this is where I will conclude. Binding of tetraquark is a very, very delicate issue. Even if you take a very simplistic model, you have to solve the four-body problem, and this is not completely obvious, because there is always this competition between four-body and 2+2, and there are interesting analogy and differences between, you know, 4-unit charge in atomic physics and tetraquark in the quark model. And then we got a better understanding of the role of symmetry breaking. And this is, with this tetraquark, we have a new effect, chromoelectric binding due to the mass difference, in addition to the more advertised chronomagnetic effect. And we, of course, thank the LHCb collaboration, who they discovered at CERN this state that was predicted exactly at the same place, but 40 years earlier. Okay, I think I would just advertise that if you are interested in those, we will get a workshop in Lyon in November, and this workshop will be dedicated to the memory of Gabriel Kapp. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean-Marc, for this very interesting lecture. You gave always the historical overview, which I thought it was very nice. And let me say that most wave functions, variational wave functions that I use are translational invariant. So if somebody criticizes me and says that I didn't account for the center of mass motion, I'll send the link, this lecture link.
And you can call me as a lawyer. I will charge you modest fees.
Oh, thank you very much, Jean-Marc.
No, but it's an amusing that in fact when you criticize somebody, you have to sure to be clean because
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So,
Do you have any questions? Tobias, go ahead.
Jean-Marc, thank
Yeah.
you for this great talk. I have a very naive question, very, very naive. When I think the situation of too heavy, PB bar or CC bar, and too light quarks, okay? Always I thought that is more easy that the heavy guys just stay close together because of the mass. And then you have a kind of halo of the light ones. And this is something that, okay, you gave many arguments about the thresholds and so on. Why this situation is in some way less stable? It seems that you can have the molecule or something like that.
No, you
Just
can.
very naive.
No. First of all, the picture you suggest is a picture of hydrocarbonium in some sense that in fact you have a AV in the center and the light around was suggested by many people, including Voloshin, who unfortunately disappears. But it is clear. And in fact, I have not mentioned that we have made the Born-Oppenheimer limit of that.
Mhm.
And then you can find it very interesting analogies between if you look at the Born-Oppenheimer potential, the effective CC potential, you find analogies between the CC potential in the baryon, in CCU baryons, and the Born-Oppenheimer potential in the tetraquarks. So I think that this is something which is probably the most reasonable things to do. As soon as you have two AV and two light, to start from this Born-Oppenheimer. But I was interested at the beginning to see the transition between, equal masses and unequal masses. So for that, the simple potential model was more suited. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jean-Marc.
Any other questions? If not, I have one, Jean-Marc. I have very little experience with particle physics, but when you're using potential models in nuclear physics, so if you start to look at the nuclear structure of light nuclei, ground state and low-lying excitations, if you stick only with pairwise interactions, only two-body interactions, you don't reproduce the experimental data. You really need a three-body force to get the numbers right. I noticed that in your Hamiltonians, you only have pairwise interactions. Could you comment?
Yeah, I think that we have done that if you take the part of V of R, which is linear, let's disregard the Coulomb part, which is probably pairwise. Then, for mesons, this is interpreted as a flux of gluons going from the quark to the antiquarks. And for baryons, you have two options. If you take my Hamiltonian, then you have three pair interactions between the quarks. But an alternative that was proposed already in the 70s is to say that this is a minimal pass between a quark and an antiquark, and then I will construct the minimal length potentials with the same string tension factor in front, which will give the potential for baryons, and this is a three-body interaction. And this is amusing because the problem of what is the minimal length between 3 points, it was solved by Torricelli and Fermat in the 18th century. So this is not a new problem invented by the quark people. And then for the tetraquark, we have tried the analog, which correspond, to solve, to find the minimal path between the two quark and the two antiquark, which is a generalization of the Fermat-Torricelli problem, which is sometimes called the Steiner problem for those four bodies. But what is found that in fact there is an option in that model which is more interesting is a flip-flop. That sometimes, the strength is not connected. Sometimes, you have a link between this quark and this antiquark, this quark and this antiquark, or sometimes when the quark moves, this quark will link to this antiquark. This is the blue and the red option, and then you take the minimum. And then this corresponds to some extra attraction. And this, interestingly, is a possibility of binding new tetraquarks, but you have to assume that to be effective, this alternative should work with different quarks. Otherwise, you cannot flip the color because the color is constrained by the Fermi principle, by the Fermi statistics. So this is there are already studies in this way. And you find also this model in a different context in the work by Isgur, what he calls the flux tube model and things like that. So this is already documented. But of course, when you calculate your four-body problem with this potential, then okay, it's a little bit more painful because you have to, for each call of the metric of the integral, so for calculating your matrix element, you have to calculate this. And there are many tricks to optimize these calculations.
I see. I think I understand. Thank you. Any more questions?
Lucas?
Yes.
I just want a general comment by Jean-Marc. I have been heard, I'm not into this field, about some triangle singularities that happens when you have your tetraquark close to the threshold of the two mesons. I don't know if you can connect or say something about that. I have been hearing many discussions about that, but okay.
This is more, I would say, an experimental question that you have, because when you have a state close to a threshold, how can you find if it is an actual state, resonance or bound state, or an effect of the threshold? Mm-hmm. This is, of course, a very, very delicate problem. Then but okay, you have seen the peak. When the peak is extremely sharp, then there is no question, there is a state. But for many of, not most, I would say, for several of the X, Y, Z state, there is a possibility that they are just cusps, or the triangle singularity, or just threshold effect, etc. This is something very delicate. Yeah.
Yeah, to understand if it is a molecule or not. Or if
molecule or not. Of course, if a state is very close to the threshold, it has a very large molecular component, but the question is whether this is the basic structure of the state or just an accidental correction because the binding energy is small. This is a different philosophy. Okay. Because some people do not believe in this potential business. Some people, today they just look at all hadron physics as the molecules.
Yes, I've heard a lot about that.
I mentioned this when I was born in physics. It was basically true law, etc. So people had described everything in terms of hadron interaction. And then when the quark model happens, people were the great relief. No, we have a systematic of understanding. But no, today people give up the quark model and come back to the Chulo type of, but of course with a much better framework because they use this chiral effective approach, which is much more powerful than the model developed in the 60s. But it's interesting that this come back of to the hadron aspect of multi-quark. Yeah, it's exotic. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions, comments? So if not, let's thank Jean-Marc again.